"You're not welcome here," Rebecca said, blocking the doorway with her body wine glass in hand. Behind her, I could hear my grandson's voice calling my name. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I simply looked past her shoulder at the Portland Craftsman home I'd helped them secure. "Enjoy the equity line while it lasts," I said quietly, turned around, and walked away. That Thanksgiving morning, standing on their porch with homemade pumpkin bread cooling in my hands, and my grandson's gift tucked under my arm, I didn't know I was witnessing the end of one life and the beginning of another. I didn't know my daughter-in-law had forged my signature on legal documents. I didn't know my son had chosen silence over honesty. But I did know this: some bridges aren't meant to be repaired. Some bridges need to burn completely before you can build something stronger in their place. My name is Emma Sullivan. This is how I disappeared from my family's life, and then reappeared with enough evidence to take back everything they stole from me. I'd always been careful with money. 35 years as a librarian teaches you the value of order, of systems, of doing things properly. After my husband Michael died 12 years ago, I became even more meticulous. I tracked every expense in a leather-bound ledger, paid off our modest Portland bungalow, and built a respectable retirement fund that would keep me comfortable without being extravagant. Nathan, my only son, grew up surrounded by books and quiet conversations. He was thoughtful as a child, the kind who would spend hours designing elaborate card houses and cry when they inevitably collapsed. As an adult, he became a web developer with a good salary but a tendency to chase trendy investments that rarely panned out. When he married Rebecca, Becca, as she insisted I call her, I tried to be welcoming, despite the cool efficiency with which she assessed everything, including me. "Your house is so quaint," she'd said during her first visit, running a manicured finger along my bookshelves. "All these paper books, so vintage." I smiled and offered her tea in my mismatched cups. She took photos for what she called her aesthetic inspiration, but never used them. When Leo was born 6 years ago, something in me bloomed again. He had Michael's curious eyes and my love of stories. I watched him 3 days a week while Nathan and Becca worked, reading him the same fairy tales I'd once read to his father, teaching him to identify birds at the feeder outside my kitchen window. "Grandma Emma, the chickadees are back," he'd shout, pressing his small hands against the glass. Then 2 years ago, Becca decided they needed a forever home in Portland's coveted Selwood neighborhood, a 1920s Craftsman with original woodwork and a view of the Willamette River. The price was steep, especially with Portland's market, but Becca had already calculated exactly how much they could afford if they renovated strategically. "We just need to secure a home equity line for the renovations," Nathan explained over dinner at my place. "The kitchen needs a complete overhaul and the bathrooms are straight out of the 70s. And the bank wants additional security since we're borrowing so much." Becca added, her voice casual as she speared a roasted carrot. "We were hoping you might co-sign Emma. Just a formality, really." I hesitated. Co-signing was never just a formality. "I'd need to review the paperwork carefully," I said. "Of course." Nathan nodded, looking relieved. "We wouldn't expect anything less." A week later, I sat at Maya Patel's kitchen table, my friend of 20 years, and a retired bank manager, reviewing the equity line documents. "It's a substantial commitment," Maya warned, her reading glasses perched on her nose. $80,000 is no small sum, especially if they default." "Nathan wouldn't let that happen," I said, though something fluttered in my stomach. "Nathan isn't the only one signing," Maya noted, tapping Becca's name on the document. "And as co-signer, you're equally responsible." I signed anyway. Because that's what mothers do. They believe in their children, even when the numbers suggest caution. For a while, everything seemed fine. They moved in and Leo got a room with a reading nook that I helped furnish with a small bookshelf and a star-patterned rug. The renovation started, workers coming and going, dust everywhere, exposed beams and wires that made me nervous when Leo was running around. But 6 months in, things shifted. My weekly dinners with them became monthly, then When things settled down, Leo's overnight visits dwindled. Becca began referring to me as Nathan's mother, rather than by my name when speaking to others. Small things almost imperceptible like water slowly eroding stone. They're just busy with the house, I told myself, sitting alone in my garden deadheading the late summer roses. It's temporary. It wasn't. I parked across the street that Thanksgiving morning, taking a moment to smooth my hair in the rearview mirror. I hadn't been invited to their dinner. Becca had mentioned something about her parents coming from Seattle and not enough space. But I'd brought pumpkin bread and a special gift for Leo, a first edition copy of The Wind in the Willows I'd found at Powell's Books, similar to the one Michael used to read to Nathan. The house looked transformed from when they'd first bought it. New cedar siding, a renovated porch, with slate tiles, landscape lighting, illuminating the Japanese maples in the front yard. Money well spent, I thought, climbing the steps. I rang the bell, hearing the chime echo inside, followed by Leo's voice and the shuffle of footsteps. Then the door opened, and there stood Becca, in a burgundy dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension, a glass of red wine already in hand at 11 in the morning. Her expression shifted from expectation to cold irritation when she saw me. "Emma," she said flatly, "we weren't expecting you." I smiled, trying to keep things light. "I know, I just wanted to drop off some bread and a little something for Leo." From inside, I heard Leo's voice. "Is that Grandma, Emma?" His footsteps pattered across hardwood. Becca shifted, blocking the doorway more completely. "Now isn't a good time? We're in the middle of preparing dinner." "I won't stay," I promised, holding out the bread and wrapped book. "You're not welcome here," she said, her voice dropping to ensure Leo couldn't hear. "Not today. Not without an invitation." I stood perfectly still, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. Behind her, Leo called again, and Becca turned slightly. "Go back to the playroom, Leo. It's just someone selling something." My hands tightened around the book. "I'm his grandmother." "And this is my house," she countered. "Nathan and I decide who comes in and when." "Where is Nathan?" I asked, trying to look past her. "Upstairs, working. Some of us have deadlines." She began to close the door. "You can leave those on the step." I don't know what made me say it. Perhaps it was the dismissal in her eyes, or the way she'd lied to Leo about who was at the door. But I straightened my shoulders and looked directly at the house I'd helped them secure. "Enjoy the equity line while it lasts," I said quietly, turned around, and walked away. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't scream or pound the steering wheel. Instead, a strange clarity washed over me, as if I were observing my life from a distance. I drove past the Willamette River, where fallen leaves swirled in copper eddies along the bank, and thought about how quietly things could change course. At home, I placed the pumpkin bread on my kitchen counter and unwrapped Leo's book, running my fingers over the embossed cover. I'd inscribed it, "For Leo who like Mole is brave enough to explore the wide world. Love, Grandma Emma." Words he might never read now. That evening, I didn't heat up the solo Thanksgiving meal I'd prepared for myself. Instead, I went to my home office and pulled out the folder containing the equity line documents. I hadn't looked at them in over a year, but something was nagging at me, a suspicion taking shape in the quiet of my empty house. I found the original paperwork, my signature on the co-signer line, the notary stamp from when Maya had witnessed it, the fine print about withdrawals requiring both signatures. Everything appeared in order until I reached a document I didn't recognize. Amendment to Home Equity Line Terms and Access. There was my signature, except it wasn't mine. The loops were wrong, the pressure points inconsistent, and the date was from 3 months ago when I'd been at a librarians' conference in Vancouver. My hands began to shake. This wasn't just Becca being territorial or Nathan being distant. This was fraud. I examined the document more closely. It authorized single-party withdrawals from the equity line without secondary approval. In essence, it removed me from any decision-making while keeping me on the hook financially. I sat back in my chair, the paper trembling in my hands. I wondered how much they had already withdrawn, where the money had gone, and if Nathan knew what Becca had done. But most of all, I wondered when exactly I had become someone they felt comfortable stealing from. The next morning, I called Maya. "Can you come over? I need your professional opinion on something." An hour later, we sat at my kitchen table, the forged document between us, alongside samples of my actual signature from other paperwork. Maya studied them silently, her reading glasses perched on her nose, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in its usual neat bun. "This isn't even a good forgery," she finally said, looking up at me. "The slant is wrong, and you always make your S with a specific curve that's missing here. Plus, the date is a Sunday. Banks don't process these kinds of documents on Sundays." I nodded, a heaviness settling in my chest, despite already knowing the answer. "So, it's definitely not my signature." "Not even close." Maya reached across the table and took my hand. "Emma, this isn't just dishonest, it's criminal. This is fraud." "I know." I pulled my hand away and stood up, walking to the window that overlooked my small garden. The raised beds lay dormant now, covered in frost, waiting for spring to awaken them again. "The question is, what do I do about it?" Maya joined me at the window. "You go to a lawyer, today." I turned to look at her, this friend who had stood beside me through Michael's death, through retirement, through every major transition of my later life. And then what? Report my own son to the police, tear apart Leo's family. "This isn't about tearing apart a family," Maya said firmly. "This is about protecting yourself from people who are willing to forge your name and potentially saddle you with enormous debt. What happens if they default? What happens if they've already spent money you don't know about?" I closed my eyes, remembering the renovations that seemed to expand beyond the original plans, Becca's new SUV, the expensive landscaping. All signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. "I need to know how much they've taken first," I said finally, "and whether Nathan was part of this." "And if he was?" Maya asked gently. I looked down at my garden again, at the dormant beds that appeared lifeless, but were in fact simply gathering strength beneath the surface. "Then I'll do what needs to be done," I said. "I've spent my life cataloging other people's stories. Maybe it's time to take control of my own." That afternoon, I called Nathan's cell phone. It went to voicemail twice before he finally answered on the third attempt. "Mom, hey," he said, sounding distracted. "I'm kind of in the middle of something." "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady. "About the equity line." A pause. "What about it?" "There's an amendment I supposedly signed, except I didn't." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed, tighter, defensive. "Look, it's complicated. Becca handled most of the paperwork. I'm sure there's an explanation." "I'd like to hear it," I said. "In person, without Becca." Another pause. "I can't today. Maybe tomorrow," I insisted. 10 o'clock. At Riverview Coffee. This isn't optional, Nathan." After we hung up, I sat in my quiet house, surrounded by books I'd collected over a lifetime, stories of betrayal and redemption, of loss and resilience. I'd always found comfort in how neatly most plots resolved, how characters transformed through hardship. My own story, it seemed, was still being written. 2 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Sullivan, this is Olivia from Leo's Montessori. I found something in Leo's cubby you should see. Can we meet briefly tomorrow? I recognized the name. Olivia Chin, Leo's kindergarten teacher, who I'd met during the school's grandparents' day last spring. We arranged to meet in the school parking lot during her lunch break. She approached my car the next day, a slender woman in her late 20s with a gentle demeanor that suited her profession. In her hand was a folded piece of construction paper. I probably shouldn't be doing this, she said, glancing around before handing it to me through the car window. But Leo's been drawing the same picture repeatedly, and when I asked him about it, what he said, I thought you should know. I unfolded the paper. Leo's drawing showed a house with 3 stick figures inside, tall, medium, and small. Clearly Nathan Becca and himself. Outside the house, separated by what looked like a wall or window, was another figure with gray hair and a sad face. Below, in his wobbly kindergarten handwriting, "Grandma Emma can't come in." My throat tightened. Has he said anything else? Olivia nodded, her expression troubled. He told me his mom said you were too busy to visit anymore, that you didn't want to come over because you were mad at them. I know it's not my place, but Leo talks about you constantly. Whatever's happening, he misses you terribly. I thanked her, waited until she returned to the building, and then let myself cry for the first time since Thanksgiving, not for myself, but for Leo, caught in the middle of adult deceptions he couldn't possibly understand. That night, I scanned the drawing and sent it to Nathan with no comment. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Where did you get this? He asked immediately. That's your first question, not why your son thinks I've abandoned him. My voice remained low, controlled, though my hand gripped the phone tightly. Becca told him you were busy, that you had other priorities now. And you let her lie to him. It wasn't a question. Nathan sighed heavily. Mom, it's complicated. Becca feels like you're always judging her, criticizing her parenting, her decisions. So she forged my signature, cut me out of Leo's life? That's her solution. What? No, that's not. He stopped. The amendment was just to make withdrawals easier. The renovation costs kept changing, and getting your signature every time was slowing things down. You knew, I said, the last piece falling into place. You knew she forged my signature. His silence confirmed it. How much have you taken, Nathan, beyond the original amount we agreed on? Another long pause. I need to go. We'll talk tomorrow. But I knew we wouldn't. The wall between us had been growing for years, brick by brick, built from small compromises and silent acquiescences. Nathan had chosen his side long ago. Now I needed to choose mine. The days after Thanksgiving blurred together in a fog of sleepless nights and unanswered calls. I moved through my routines mechanically, watering my houseplants, sorting through mail, preparing simple meals I barely tasted. But beneath this performance of normalcy, something was crumbling inside me. Each morning, I checked my phone for messages from Nathan. Each night, I put it away, screen dark and silent. I'd left 3 voicemails, each more direct than the last. The final one simply said, I know about the forgery. I know about the withdrawals. We either discuss this as adults, or I'll be forced to take legal action. No response. I kept seeing Leo's drawing in my mind, the sad figure outside the house, the wall between us. I wondered what he was being told, what story Becca was crafting to explain my absence. Children absorb the narratives adults provide them, building their understanding of the world from these foundations. What kind of foundation was being laid for Leo now? On the 5th day, I received a text from Becca. Stop harassing Nathan. You've done enough damage. I read it twice, marveling at the inversion of reality, how skillfully she had transformed herself into the victim. I started to type various responses, some pleading, some angry, but deleted them all. Instead, I took a screenshot and saved it to a folder I'd created labeled evidence. That night, I dreamt of my library, the one I'd managed for 20 years before retirement. In the dream, I was searching frantically for a book that kept moving, shifting locations on the shelves. When I finally found it and opened it all, the pages were blank. I woke up gasping, the darkness of my bedroom pressing around me like a physical weight. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the street lamps cast pools of light on the empty sidewalk. It was 3:47 a.m. I felt hollowed out, scraped raw. Was this what it meant to be discarded? To realize that the love you'd given so freely was conditional on your utility. The next day, I forced myself to go to the community garden where I maintained a small plot. December in Portland meant little actual gardening, but there was always maintenance, clearing dead growth, checking winter coverings, preparing for spring. Physical work to quiet my restless mind. I was pulling the last withered tomato vines when I sensed someone watching me. I turned to find Maya standing at the garden gate, holding 2 coffee cups. "You haven't answered my calls," she said, offering me one of the cups. I peeled off my gardening gloves and accepted the coffee. "I haven't answered anyone's calls. Have you talked to a lawyer yet?" I shook my head, returning to the tomato vines. Maya sighed and set her coffee down on the wooden border of my garden plot. "Emma, look at me." I straightened reluctantly. "You're shutting down," she said. "I've seen this before after Michael died. You retreat, you go through the motions, but you're not actually dealing with what's happening." "What exactly am I supposed to be dealing with?" My voice came out sharper than intended. "That my son allowed his wife to commit fraud? That they've been systematically pushing me out of their lives? That my grandson thinks I've abandoned him? Please tell me which part I should focus on first." Maya didn't flinch at my tone. "All of it, but you need to do it actively, not by disappearing into yourself." I turned away, blinking back sudden tears. "I don't know how to fight this, Maya. I don't know if I even want to." "What do you mean?" I gestured helplessly. "Maybe this is just over. Maybe I need to accept that the family I thought I had doesn't exist anymore. And let them get away with fraud, potentially leave you financially liable for whatever they've done." Maya stepped closer. "The Emma Sullivan I know doesn't give up. She doesn't let people walk all over her, not even family, especially not family." I looked down at my hands, soil embedded beneath my nails despite the gloves. Hands that had shelved books, planted gardens, rocked Leo to sleep. Hands that had signed documents out of trust and love. "I'm tired of being strong," I admitted quietly. Maya picked up her coffee cup. "Then let me be strong for you, just for a little while." She pulled a business card from her pocket and pressed it into my palm. "This is Sofia Rodriguez. She's a lawyer who specializes in elder financial abuse." "I'm not elderly," I protested automatically. "Legally at 65 you are, and what they've done qualifies as financial abuse." Maya's expression softened. "Just call her. Listen to what she has to say. Then decide what you want to do." I slipped the card into my jacket pocket. "I'll think about it." "That's a start." Maya hesitated, then added, "And Emma, whatever you decide, you're not alone in this." After she left, I sat on the small bench near my garden plot, watching winter birds flit among the dormant beds. A black-capped chickadee landed on a dried sunflower stalk, Leo's favorite bird. We'd spent hours last summer watching them at my feeder. Would there be more summers like that? Or was that chapter of my life already closed? I pulled out Sophia's business card again. Her office was in downtown Portland, not far from the Central Library where I'd spent most of my career. The proximity felt like a sign, though I'd never been one to believe in such things. That evening, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a printout of my credit report and a handwritten note. Be careful what you start. Everyone has secrets. The threat was unmistakable, if clumsy. I added it to my evidence folder, hands steady despite the chill that ran through me. They were escalating, which meant they were afraid. Good. They should be. I called Sofia Rodriguez the next morning and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. Her office was smaller than I expected, tucked into a converted Victorian in Portland's Pearl District. Sofia herself was a surprise 2 younger than I anticipated, with an undercut hairstyle and vibrant geometric earrings that contrasted with her otherwise professional appearance. "Ms. Sullivan," she said, rising from behind her desk to shake my hand. "Please have a seat." I settled into the chair opposite her, clutching my folder of evidence. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." Maya's call made it sound urgent. Sofia sat back down. She mentioned potential financial fraud involving family members. I nodded, then slowly, methodically laid out the whole story. The co-signed equity line, the gradual distancing, Thanksgiving's rejection, the forged amendment, the threatening note. As I spoke, Sofia took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly letting me talk uninterrupted. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Ms. Sullivan." "Emma, please." "Emma, what you've described is a clear case of fraud with potential charges of elder financial abuse, forgery, and harassment. Do you have the original documents with you?" I handed her the folder. She examined each paper carefully, paying particular attention to the forged amendment and the threatening note. "The forgery isn't even sophisticated," she noted, echoing Maya's assessment. "And sending this note was incredibly unwise on their part. It demonstrates consciousness of guilt and constitutes intimidation." She looked up at me. "The question now is, what do you want out of this? Are you seeking criminal charges, civil remedies, or just protection from financial liability?" I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. I don't know. I don't want to destroy my relationship with my grandson. Unfortunately, that relationship is already being controlled by the people who committed fraud against you, Sofia said gently. Legal action might actually be your best chance at re-establishing contact with him. How so? If we file for an audit of the equity line and seek to void the fraudulent amendment, it creates leverage. We can potentially negotiate visitation rights with your grandson as part of any settlement. I considered this, turning the possibility over in my mind. And if they've misused the funds, taken more than was agreed upon, then we can seek recovery of those funds potentially through a lien on the house, or even forced sale if the amount is substantial. Sofia leaned forward. But before we take any action, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. I recommend we start with a financial discovery, find out exactly how much has been withdrawn and where the money went. I nodded slowly. How do we do that? I file a preliminary motion alleging fraud, which gives us legal grounds to request all transactions related to the equity line. Once we have that information, we can decide on next steps. It sounded so clinical, so impersonal, reducing my family's betrayal to legal terminology and procedural steps. Yet there was something steadying about it too, as if by naming the offense, we were already beginning to address it. And the cost? I asked practically. Sofia named a figure that made me wince but wasn't as bad as I'd feared. We can also discuss payment plans if needed, but given the nature of the case, there's a good chance we can recover legal fees as part of any settlement. I took a deep breath. I need to think about this. Of course. Sofia gathered the documents and returned them to my folder. Take a few days, but know that the sooner we act, the better position we'll be in. Financial trails get colder with time. I stood to leave, then paused. One more question. If we do this, if we take legal action, what happens to Nathan? Could he face criminal charges? Sofia's expression softened slightly. That would depend on his level of involvement and whether the prosecutor decides to pursue charges. But if he cooperates, testifies against his wife, makes restitution, The consequences could be mitigated. I nodded, clutching the folder to my chest. Thank you. As I walked back to my car through the cold December afternoon, watching my breath form clouds in the air, I felt something shift inside me. The fog of despair was lifting, replaced by a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in months. They had taken enough from me. They would take no more. I didn't need days to decide. By the time I reached home that afternoon, I knew what I had to do. I called Sophia and authorized her to begin proceedings immediately. I'll file the initial paperwork tomorrow, she said. But I should warn you, once this begins, they'll be officially notified. Things might get uncomfortable. They're already uncomfortable, I replied. At least now we'll be moving toward resolution. That night, I finally slept without waking, as if making a decision had unlocked something within me. In the morning, I felt different, lighter, more focused. I went to my bookshelf and pulled down my old librarian's ledger, the one I'd used to track reference questions before everything became computerized. Its pages were mostly blank now, waiting for new purpose. I labeled the first page, Investigation, and began listing everything I needed to document dates, conversations, financial records, photographs. If I was going to fight, I would do it thoroughly, methodically, the way I'd approached every challenge in my professional life. Maya came over that afternoon, bringing lunch and moral support. We sat at my kitchen table as I outlined Sophia's strategy. She'll file for discovery of all equity line transactions, I explained. Once we know exactly what they've taken and how they used it, we can determine next steps. Maya nodded approvingly. And have you tried contacting Nathan again? No. I stirred my soup absently. I think that part is over for now. The next communication will come from Sophia. How do you feel about that? I considered the question carefully. Sad, angry, but also resolved. Like I'm finally addressing something I've been avoiding for years. Which is that Nathan stopped being the son I raised a long time ago. I set down my spoon. And that I've been making excuses for him, enabling him, because I couldn't bear to see who he'd actually become. Maya reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's a painful realization. Yes, I agreed. But necessary. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo. Sophia filed the initial paperwork, and I waited for the reaction I knew would come. I kept my phone nearby at all times, jumped slightly whenever a car door slammed on my street, checked my email compulsively. The response when it finally came wasn't what I expected. It was nearly 11 at night when my doorbell rang, 3 short, aggressive bursts that made me startle from my reading chair. I approached the door, cautiously peering through the peephole to find Nathan standing on my porch, shoulders hunched against the December rain hair plastered to his forehead. I hesitated, then opened the door, but kept the security chain in place. Nathan? He looked terrible, unshaven eyes bloodshot, wearing a wrinkled jacket I didn't recognize. Mom, we need to talk. We needed to talk weeks ago, I said, keeping my voice steady. Now we're past talking. Please, he said, and something in his voice, a crack of vulnerability, made me relent. I closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it. 20 minutes. Then you leave, and we continue through legal channels. He stepped inside, dripping rainwater onto my entryway rug. I didn't offer to take his coat or make coffee. Instead, I led him to the living room and gestured to the sofa while I took my reading chair, maintaining distance between us. I got a call from a lawyer today. He began, not meeting my eyes. She said you're filing fraud charges against us, against your own family, against the people who forged my signature and are illegally withdrawing money in my name. I corrected. Yes. Mom, you don't understand. Things have been tight with the renovation costs and… Stop. I held up a hand. I'm not interested in excuses. I want to know exactly how much you've taken from the equity line beyond what we originally agreed to and where that money went. He shifted uncomfortably. I don't know the exact amount. Ballpark figure. Nathan stared at his hands. Maybe 40,000 on top of the original 80. I felt the blood drain from my face. $40,000 that you borrowed in my name without my knowledge or consent. It wasn't all at once, he said quickly. It was over time. The renovation costs kept climbing, and then Becca's car needed replacing, and there were some investment opportunities. Investment opportunities, I repeated flatly. Like what? He mumbled something about cryptocurrency and a friend's startup. And the house renovations, are they even complete? Nathan's silence told me everything. I leaned forward. Nathan, look at me. He raised his eyes reluctantly. Did you know Becca forged my signature on that amendment? A pause then. Not at first. But you found out. He nodded slightly. And you said nothing, did nothing. I confronted her, he said defensively. She said it was just paperwork that you'd never know or be affected by it. And you believed that, or you just wanted to believe it. Nathan ran a hand through his damp hair. What do you want me to say, Mom? That I messed up? Fine, I messed up, but going to lawyers threatening us with fraud charges. This is extreme. We're family. Family. I repeated the word, tasting bitter. Was Becca thinking about family when she told Leo I didn't want to see him anymore? Was she considering family when she turned me away at Thanksgiving? When she sent threatening notes to my house? She didn't, Nathan began, then stopped, confusion crossing his face. What threatening notes? I stood, went to my desk, and returned with the note and credit report. This came to my mailbox 3 days ago. No return address. Nathan took it, read it, and his face paled. I didn't know about this. For the first time, I believed him. There's a lot you don't know, Nathan, or choose not to see. That's why we're here. He handed the note back, shoulders slumping. So what happens now? You sue us, force us to sell the house, make us tell Leo his grandmother is taking away his home. Don't you dare put this on me, I said, my voice low but intense. I'm not the one who created this situation. I'm not the one who committed fraud. I'm not the one who's been lying to a 6-year-old child. Nathan flinched. What happens next? I continued more calmly. Is my lawyer will obtain records of all equity line transactions. We'll see exactly how much was taken and how it was used. Then we'll determine appropriate restitution. We can't repay that kind of money, Nathan said, a note of panic entering his voice. Not right away. We don't have it. Then the house may need to be sold to cover the debt. Mom, please, there has to be another way. He leaned forward, desperation evident. What if I cooperate? Tell you everything, show you all the records. Would that make a difference? I studied my son, this man I'd raised, loved, trusted. I searched for traces of the thoughtful boy who built card houses, who cried when they fell. What I found instead was someone whose moral foundation had eroded so gradually, he hadn't noticed it disappearing. That would depend on your level of cooperation, I said finally, and whether you're willing to be honest about Becca's actions as well as your own. She'll never forgive me. That's not my concern. Nathan stared at the floor for a long moment. Can I think about it? Talk to Becca first? You have 48 hours, I said. After that, we proceed with formal discovery regardless of your decision. He nodded slowly, then stood. For what it's worth, I am sorry. I never thought it would go this far. Neither did I replied. But here we are. After Nathan left, I sat motionless in my chair, listening to the rain against the windows. $40,000 on top of the original $80,000. If they defaulted, I could lose my home, my retirement security, everything I'd carefully built over decades. The next morning, I called Sophia to update her on Nathan's visit. $40,000 is significant, she said. And if they've been misrepresenting how the funds were used, that strengthens our case substantially. Nathan seemed unaware of the threatening note, I told her. I think that might have been solely Becca's doing. Interesting. That could be useful if he decides to cooperate. Sophia paused. Have you considered what you want as an end goal here, beyond financial restitution? I hadn't, not explicitly. I want access to my grandson. I want Nathan to take responsibility for his actions, and I want to be secure knowing they can't take anything more from me. Those are reasonable objectives, Sophia said. Let's see if Nathan makes contact within your deadline. If not, we move forward with formal proceedings. Exactly 47 hours later, my phone rang. Nathan's name flashed on the screen. I'll cooperate, he said without preamble. I'll tell you everything, show you all the transactions, testify if needed. But I need something in return. Which is protection for Leo and for me. His voice wavered slightly. Becca, she's not who I thought she was. The things I've found in the past 2 days, there's more than just the equity line. Much more. A chill ran through me. What do you mean? Can we meet not at your house, somewhere public? We arranged to meet at a small cafe near Mount Tabor Park, a place neither of us frequented. When I arrived, Nathan was already there, a thick manila envelope on the table before him, his expression grave. I've been blind, he said as I sat down. Willfully, stupidly blind. He opened the envelope and spread its contents between us. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications, a paper trail of deception spanning nearly 3 years. The equity line was just the beginning, Nathan explained, pointing to highlighted sections. Becca's been opening credit cards in my name, taking out personal loans, even a second mortgage I knew nothing about. I scanned the documents, my librarian's eye quickly cataloging dates, amounts, patterns. How much total? Nearly $200,000 all told. Nathan's voice was hollow. Some went to legitimate renovation costs. Some to her parents. They've been in financial trouble for years, apparently. The rest. He shrugged helplessly. Shopping. Travel, when I thought she was visiting her sister. And investments that never seemed to pay off. And you discovered all this in the past 2 days? After you showed me that threatening note, something clicked. Nathan rubbed his eyes. I started looking at accounts I normally let Becca handle, found statements she'd been hiding, emails about loans I never applied for. It was like pulling a thread and watching the whole sweater unravel. I studied my son, noting the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Why are you showing me this? Because I need help. He admitted, his voice breaking slightly. I can't fix this alone. And because you deserve to know the truth, all of it. I reached for the bank statements, examining them more closely. Have you confronted Becca? Not yet. I've been gathering evidence first. Nathan lowered his voice. She doesn't know I've found all this, or that I'm meeting with you. I looked up sharply. Where does she think you are now? At a client meeting. I've been sleeping in the guest room claiming work stress. She's suspicious but not alarmed yet. I considered this information, turning it over in my mind like a complex reference question requiring multiple sources to answer. What exactly do you want from me, Nathan? Help navigating the legal side, protection from criminal charges if possible, and, he hesitated, advice on what to do about Leo. For the first time in our conversation, I heard genuine fear in his voice, not fear of financial ruin or legal consequences, but fear for his child. It was the most honest emotion he'd expressed in years. Sophia can help with the legal aspects, I said after a moment, but only if you commit fully to cooperating. That means signed statements, testimony against Becca if needed, full financial disclosure. He nodded immediately. Whatever it takes. As for Leo, I paused, choosing my words carefully. Children need stability and truth appropriate to their age. Right now, he's being told lies about why I'm not in his life. That needs to stop immediately. It will, Nathan promised. I want him to see you again. He misses you terribly. I felt a pang in my chest at these words, but kept my expression neutral. We'll need to be careful about how we proceed. Becca will not react well when she realizes what's happening. I know. Nathan gathered the documents and returned them to the envelope. What's our next step? You make copies of everything, I said decisively. Complete copies, not just the pages you've shown me. Then you call Sophia and schedule a meeting today if possible. Tell her everything you've told me and more. Nathan nodded, looking simultaneously terrified and relieved. And after that, I thought of the community garden of dormant plants gathering strength beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. After that, we bring everything into the light. Sophia's office felt different, this timeless, intimidating, more like a war room where strategies were mapped and decisive actions planned. I sat beside Nathan as he laid out the evidence he'd gathered, watching Sophia's expression shift from professional interest to genuine alarm as the full scope of Becca's financial deceptions became clear. This goes well beyond what we initially suspected, she said, examining a loan application with Nathan's forged signature. We're looking at multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, forgery, potentially even wire fraud, which is a federal offense. Nathan paled. I didn't know about most of this, I swear. Your ignorance may protect you from criminal liability, Sophia acknowledged, but it doesn't eliminate your financial responsibility for joint accounts or loans taken in your name. I understand, Nathan said quietly. Sophia organized the documents into neat piles. Here's what we need to do. First, we file an emergency motion to freeze the equity line and any joint accounts to prevent further withdrawals. Second, we amend our original complaint to include all these additional findings. Third, we need to consider whether this warrants criminal charges, or if we want to pursue purely civil remedies. She turned to me. Emma, that's largely your decision. Pressing criminal charges would likely result in the most severe consequences for Rebecca, but it could also complicate custody matters regarding Leo. I looked at Nathan, seeing the fear in his eyes at the mention of custody. What do you think? I asked him. He took a deep breath. I think Becca needs to face consequences, real ones, but I'm terrified of what this means for Leo. I nodded, understanding his conflict. For now, let's focus on stopping the financial bleeding and securing the evidence. We can decide about criminal charges once we have a complete picture. A reasonable approach, Sophia agreed. Nathan, I'll need you to sign several affidavits today, and we should discuss a strategy for when Rebecca discovers what's happening. That moment is coming, and soon. Nathan rubbed his face. She'll be furious, vindictive. Which is why we need to be prepared, Sophia said firmly. If there's any risk to you or Leo, we should discuss protective measures. You think she might be dangerous? I asked, alarmed. Sophia's expression remained carefully neutral. Financial fraudsters often become unpredictable when exposed. I'm not suggesting physical danger necessarily, but emotional manipulation, attempts to destroy evidence, or using Leo as leverage are all possibilities we should anticipate. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. By the end, we had a comprehensive plan. Emergency motions would be filed that afternoon to freeze accounts. Nathan would secure additional financial records and personal documents, and most importantly, he would ensure Leo's passport was safely in his possession in case Becca contemplated desperate measures. As we prepared to leave, Sophia handed Nathan a business card. "This is a family therapist who specializes in helping children through parental separation and conflict. You might want to set up a preliminary consultation just to have resources in place for Leo." Nathan took the card, his hand trembling slightly. "Thank you." Outside, standing in the weak December sunlight, my son looked simultaneously older and younger, burdened with new knowledge but somehow unbent, as if speaking the truth had already begun to straighten something long twisted inside him. "I don't know how to go home," he admitted. "How to look at her across the dinner table knowing everything I know now." I touched his arm gently. "One step at a time, secure the documents first. Then we'll figure out the rest." He nodded, then surprised me by leaning down to hug me, awkwardly, briefly, but genuinely. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything." I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't. Instead, I said, "We'll get through this." That evening, Sophia called to confirm the emergency motions had been filed and accepted. "The equity line and joint accounts should be frozen by morning," she reported. "Now we wait for Rebecca's reaction." We didn't wait long. At 7:38 the next morning, my phone exploded with texts from Nathan. "She found out. Bank called about frozen accounts. Complete meltdown, threatening to take Leo to her parents." "What do I do?" I called him immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. Panicking, I called Sophia, who answered on the second ring despite the early hour. Nathan texted that Becca's threatening to take Leo. I reported, already grabbing my car keys. "I'm heading over there now." "Emma, wait," Sophia cautioned. "If the situation is volatile, you showing up could escalate things. Let me call the police for a welfare check instead." "She's my daughter-in-law, not some armed criminal," I protested, though even as I said it, I wasn't entirely sure. The Becca I thought I knew had never existed. "Nevertheless, let's handle this through proper channels. Give me their address." I reluctantly provided the information, then paced my living room, checking my phone obsessively. 20 minutes later, Nathan called. "Are you all right? Is Leo safe?" I demanded immediately. "We're okay," he assured me, though his voice sounded strained. "The police just left. They were doing a welfare check. Was that you're doing?" "Sophia's," I explained. "What happened?" "Becca got a call from the bank about the frozen accounts. She went ballistic, started throwing things, screaming that I'd betrayed her." He lowered his voice. Leo was terrified. I took him to his room, but he could hear everything. My heart ached for my grandson. "Where is she now?" "Gone. She packed a bag and left right before the police arrived. Said she was going to her parents and that I'd regret this." Nathan's voice cracked. "Mom, she took Leo's birth certificate and social security card. I can't find them anywhere." The implications were chilling. "But not his passport." "No, I already had that secured in my work safe." He sounded exhausted. "What do I do now?" "Stay put, I'm coming over." 40 minutes later, I pulled into their driveway, noting Becca's SUV was indeed gone. The house looked different in daylight, still beautiful with its renovated exterior, but somehow diminished, as if its false foundation was already beginning to show. Nathan opened the door before I could knock, Leo half hidden behind his legs, eyes wide and wary. "Grandma," he said uncertainly. I knelt down, meeting him at eye level. "Hello, sweetheart." He hesitated, then launched himself into my arms with such force I nearly toppled backward. "Mom said you didn't want to see us anymore." He mumbled into my shoulder. "That was never true," I said firmly, holding him tight. Never, not for one single moment. Over Leo's head, I met Nathan's gaze, saw the shame there, the recognition of his complicity in this particular cruelty. He looked away first. "Why don't we go inside?" I suggested gently. "It's cold out here." The interior of the house revealed the chaos of the morning's confrontation. A broken vase, papers scattered across the dining room table, cabinet doors hanging open. But more striking was what I didn't see evidence of the extensive renovations that supposedly justified withdrawals from the equity line. The kitchen looked largely unchanged from when they'd bought the house, save for new paint and cabinet hardware. The bathrooms, which I glimpsed down the hallway, still had their original 1970s tile. While Nathan made coffee, I sat with Leo in the living room, letting him show me his latest Lego creations and school artwork. He seemed desperate for normalcy, clinging to my hand whenever I shifted position, as if afraid I might vanish again. "Dad said Mom had to go away for a while," he confided, voice small. "She was really mad." "Sometimes grown-ups get upset and need space to calm down," I said carefully. "It doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong." Leo considered this. "She was yelling about money and about you." "What about me?" "She said you were trying to take our house away." He looked up, eyes wide with concern. "You wouldn't do that, right?" I brushed his hair back from his forehead. "No, sweetheart. I would never take your home away. There are some grown-up problems that need fixing, but none of them are your fault or your responsibility." Nathan appeared with coffee mugs and Leo's favorite apple juice. "Hey, buddy, why don't you go build that space station you were working on, Grandma, and I need to talk about some boring grown-up stuff." Leo looked between us suspiciously, but then nodded. "Okay, but Grandma stays for lunch." "Absolutely," I promised. Once Leo was settled in his room, Nathan and I sat at the dining table amid the scattered papers. "I've been going through everything," he said, voice low. "Bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents. It's worse than I thought." "How so?" "The second mortgage, the one I knew nothing about, she used it to buy a condo in Seattle near her parents. It's in her name only." He pushed a property deed across the table. "And she's been making deposits into an account I didn't know existed, nearly $70,000 over the past year." I examined the document, noting the purchase date from 6 months earlier. "She's been planning this for a while." Nathan nodded grimly. "I think so. Creating an escape hatch, building a separate life. Using my credit, your equity line, our joint savings to fund it all." "Have you spoken to her since she left?" "She texted to say she's staying with her parents and that I should enjoy it while it lasts, whatever that means." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've already called Sophia. She's preparing emergency custody papers and advising the local police about the missing documents, in case Becca tries to take Leo across state lines." I nodded, relieved he was being proactive. "And financially?" "I've frozen everything I can, changed passwords, alerted credit bureaus." Nathan looked exhausted but determined. "Sophia says we should expect formal legal response, soon, likely a counterfiling claiming I knew about and approved all the transactions." "Would that hold up, given the forged signatures?" "Probably not, but it could complicate things, drag out proceedings." He hesitated. "There's something else. Olivia, Leo's teacher, called me this morning. Becca showed up at the school, tried to sign Leo out early. The office refused because she wasn't on the approved list for today." My blood ran cold. "She tried to take him." "Seems that way." Olivia said Becca made a scene, threatened to call her lawyer, then left when the principal intervened. Nathan looked down at his hands. "I've already called the school, explained we're in the middle of a domestic situation, and updated the approved pickup list. You're on it now, by the way." "Thank you," I said, softly touched by this gesture of trust. We spent the next hour organizing the scattered papers, creating a timeline of Becca's financial maneuvers, and discussing immediate practical concerns, Leo's routine security measures, communication strategies. When Leo wandered in asking for lunch, we set the work aside and focused on creating a semblance of normalcy, making sandwiches, discussing his latest school project, planning a trip to the park, if weather permitted. After lunch, while Nathan helped Leo build his space station, I stepped onto the back deck to call Sophia with updates. The garden was neglected, fallen leaves matting the grass, planting beds overgrown with weeds, another indication that renovation funds had gone elsewhere. "The attempted school pickup is concerning," Sophia said after I relayed the information. "It suggests Rebecca may be considering desperate measures. Has Nathan filed for emergency custody yet?" "He said you're preparing the paperwork." "It's ready. He needs to sign and file it today, ideally within the next few hours." Sophia's voice was calm but insistent. "And Emma, you should be prepared for Rebecca to contact you directly. Now that the initial shock has worn off, she'll be strategizing, looking for leverage." "What kind of leverage could she possibly find with me? I'm not the one who committed fraud." "People like Rebecca often project their own behaviors onto others. She may try to claim you coerced Nathan or that you're manipulating him out of revenge. She'll construct narratives that justify her actions while villainizing you." I watched a winter wren hop along the deck railing, searching for insects in the weathered wood. "Let her try. We have evidence." "Evidence matters in court," Sophia acknowledged. "But public perception and family dynamics are another matter entirely. Just be prepared." Sophia's warning proved prescient. That evening, after I returned home from Nathan's, I received an email from an attorney representing Rebecca Sullivan demanding I cease and desist all coercive actions against my client, and threatening countersuits for harassment, defamation, and intentional interference with familial relations. I forwarded it to Sophia without comment, then made myself tea and sat in my reading chair, trying to process the day's events. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won? This is just beginning. You'll never see Leo again when I'm finished." I didn't respond, simply took a screenshot and added it to my evidence folder. 10 minutes later, another text arrived. "Nathan never loved you. He told me how controlling you are, how you smothered him. We laughed about it. You're pathetic." Again, I documented without responding. The third text, however, was different. "Ask Nathan about July 15th last year. Ask what he really did with the money. You think you know everything, you know nothing." This gave me pause. July 15th of last year. I consulted my calendar and found nothing significant noted, but the specificity was troubling. Was there something Nathan hadn't disclosed? Or was this simply Becca's attempt to sow discord to fracture our newly repaired relationship? I decided not to mention it until I could speak with Nathan privately. For now, the priority was securing Leo's safety and preventing further financial damage. The next morning brought news Nathan had successfully filed for emergency temporary custody, citing the attempted school pickup and missing identity documents as evidence of potential flight risk. The judge had granted the order giving Nathan sole physical custody pending a formal hearing in 2 weeks. "Becca's been served with the papers," Nathan reported when I called. Her lawyer immediately filed a counter-motion claiming I'm unfit due to mental instability and financial irresponsibility. "That's rich coming from her," I noted dryly. "It gets better. She's also claiming you exert undue influence over me and that this whole fraud allegation is a conspiracy between us to punish her for setting appropriate boundaries with an intrusive mother-in-law." Despite everything, I almost laughed at the absurdity. "And what does Sophia say?" "That it's a standard playbook deflect project, create confusion. The good news is, the financial evidence speaks for itself. The judge has ordered a full forensic accounting of all accounts related to the equity line's second mortgage and joint assets." "When will that happen?" "It's already underway. Sophia expedited it based on the evidence of funds being moved to hidden accounts." Nathan sounded more focused than I'd heard him in months. The preliminary report should be ready within days. Those days passed in a strange new rhythm. I helped Nathan establish routines for Leo, who seemed both confused by his mother's absence and relieved by the cessation of conflict. We didn't disparage Becca in front of him, simply explained that Mom and Dad need some time apart to figure out grown-up problems. Leo had nightmares the first few nights, waking crying for his mother, despite her recent behavior. Nathan would hold him, rock him back to sleep, then retreat to the kitchen, where I often found him staring blankly at financial documents, as if searching for clues to when exactly his life had derailed. On the fourth day, the forensic accountant's preliminary report arrived. Nathan brought it to my house after dropping Leo at school, his expression grim. "It's all here," he said, spreading the documents across my dining table. "Every transaction, every transfer, every withdrawal. 3 years of systematic financial fraud." The report was devastating in its clinical detail. Rebecca had not only forged signatures and opened unauthorized accounts, but had been methodically siphoning funds from joint accounts into private ones using stolen identity information to secure loans and misrepresenting financial states to both banks and Nathan. The total amount diverted or fraudulently obtained exceeded $270,000, far more than even Nathan had estimated. Most of it went to the Seattle condo investment accounts in her name only and transfers to her parents, Nathan noted, pointing to highlighted sections. The renovation expenses were mostly fabricated or grossly inflated. She'd get legitimate quotes, show me the paperwork, then hire cheaper contractors, or do minimal work and pocket the difference. I examined a page detailing the equity line transactions. And July 15th last year, there's a large withdrawal here. Nathan frowned, checking the entry. $23,000. That was supposedly for the master bathroom remodel. Contractors came, did some demolition, then disappeared. Becca said there were permit issues that we'd have to wait. We've been using the guest bathroom ever since. And you had no idea the money wasn't actually going to renovations. He shook his head, shame evident in his expression. I was working 60-hour weeks on a major project. Becca handled all the contractor communications, all the financial arrangements. I just trusted her. I thought about Becca's text, ask what he really did with the money, and wondered if this was simply another attempt to shift blame. The evidence suggested Nathan had been a victim of her deceptions, not a co-conspirator. Sophia needs to see this immediately, I said, gathering the papers. This goes beyond civil fraud. This is criminal activity systematically conducted over years. Nathan nodded slowly. I know, and as much as I hate the thought of Leo's mother facing criminal charges, I can't protect her from this. Not anymore. We took the report to Sophia that afternoon. She reviewed it methodically, her expression growing increasingly grave. This is exceptionally damning, she confirmed. The pattern of deception is clear, deliberate, and sustained. No judge would view this as simple marital financial disagreements or misunderstandings. So what happens now? I asked. We file these findings with the court immediately, Sophia said decisively. They'll bolster both the financial case and the custody case, and… She hesitated, looking at Nathan. We need to discuss whether to formally refer this to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Nathan stared at the table. If criminal charges are filed, what happens to Leo to custody arrangements? That would depend on multiple factors, whether Rebecca is detained pending trial, whether she takes a plea deal, the specific charges filed. Sophia's voice softened slightly. But given the evidence of financial crimes, identity theft, and the attempted removal of Leo from school without authorization, you'd have a strong case for primary or sole custody regardless. Nathan nodded, visibly struggling with the decision. I need to think about it. Just give me a day. Of course, Sophia agreed. But the civil proceedings continue regardless. I'll file these findings today, and we have the formal custody hearing next week. As we left Sophia's office, Nathan turned to me, his expression troubled. There's something I haven't told you about Becca's parents. What about them? They've been investigated for financial fraud before. Nothing stuck, or at least that's what Becca told me. But now I'm wondering if this is a family pattern, something she learned from them. I considered this new information. Have you told Sophia? Not yet. I wasn't sure if it was relevant. It could be, I said, especially if they've been receiving funds from Becca's schemes. They might be accomplices, not just beneficiaries. Nathan looked sick at the thought. I'll tell Sophia tomorrow. That night, I received another text from Becca's number. You'll regret pushing this. I know things about Nathan you don't. Things that would break your heart. I ignored it, adding it to my growing evidence file. The next morning, I woke to find an envelope had been slipped under my front door sometime during the night. Inside was a grainy printout of a bank statement showing a $23,000 withdrawal, the July 15th transaction, along with a handwritten note. Ask Nathan about his gambling debts. Ask who really took this money. I stared at the document, uncertain what to make of it. Was this legitimate evidence of Nathan's complicity or another of Becca's manipulations? The timing was suspicious, coming just after we'd discussed that specific transaction with Sophia. I called Nathan immediately. We need to talk. In person. Can you come by after dropping Leo at school? An hour later, Nathan sat at my kitchen table examining the printout and note. This is a real statement, he acknowledged, but it's been altered. Look at the account number. It's our joint checking, not the equity line, and the withdrawal notation has been changed. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through photos, and showed me an image of the original statement. Here's the actual transaction. It was a transfer to our savings account for Leo's college fund, something we did quarterly. Becca must have photoshopped this to create confusion. Relief washed over me. So there were no gambling debts? Nathan looked surprised. Gambling? No, I've never gambled in my life except for that one disastrous poker night with colleagues where I lost $40 and decided it wasn't for me. He frowned. Is that what she's claiming? I showed him the text messages. She's trying to drive a wedge between us, make me doubt you. Nathan shook his head, a mixture of anger and sadness crossing his face. She's desperate. The forensic report exposed everything. She has nothing left but manipulation. Have you decided about the criminal charges? He nodded slowly. I spoke with Sophia this morning. We're moving forward with a formal referral to the DA's office. Not just because of the money, but because of what this reveals about Becca's character, her willingness to lie and manipulate. I can't risk Leo being exposed to that without legal protections in place. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It's the right decision, Nathan. Difficult, but right. The next week passed in a blur of legal filings, court appearances, and careful management of Leo's emotional well-being. The judge overseeing the case ordered all of Becca's accounts frozen after reviewing the forensic report. The Seattle condo was placed under temporary injunction, preventing its sale or transfer. And most significantly, Nathan's emergency custody order was extended pending a full hearing. Becca's counteroffensive grew increasingly desperate. She attempted to access Nathan's computer, remotely sent threatening messages to both of us, and even contacted my former colleagues at the library, spreading false stories about my mental stability. None of it gained traction. The evidence against her was too substantial, her credibility too damaged. The district attorney's office opened a formal investigation based on our referral, assigning a prosecutor specializing in financial crimes. Within days, they had obtained warrants for Becca's financial records beyond those we'd already discovered. What they found expanded the case further, a pattern of similar behavior predating her marriage to Nathan, involving former roommates, previous relationships, and indeed her parents. The prosecutor contacted us to schedule formal interviews, explaining that charges would likely include wire fraud identity theft, forgery, and potentially conspiracy if her parents' involvement could be proven. Through it all, we tried to maintain normalcy for Leo. I stayed at Nathan's house several nights a week, helping with bedtime routines and morning preparations. We enrolled him in play therapy, where he created art, expressing his confusion and fears. And we arranged supervised video calls with Becca, painfully awkward sessions, where she alternated between excessive affection toward Leo and barely concealed hostility toward Nathan. The formal custody hearing arrived on a cold January morning. The courtroom was nearly empty, just us, our attorneys, Becca, with her lawyer, and a court-appointed advocate for Leo. Becca looked diminished, somehow, her designer clothes hanging loosely dark circles beneath expertly applied makeup. She didn't meet my eyes, focusing instead on Nathan with a gaze that fluctuated between pleading and venomous. The proceedings were surprisingly brief. The judge had already reviewed the forensic accounting report, the documentation of Becca's attempted school pickup, the evidence of identity document theft, and the pending criminal investigation. He interrupted Becca's attorney mid-argument about parental alienation to ask pointed questions about the financial fraud evidence. "Counselor, I've reviewed the evidence thoroughly," the judge said firmly. "Your client has engaged in systematic financial fraud, including against her own spouse. She attempted to remove the minor child from school without authorization during a period of high conflict. She has been documented sending threatening messages to both the child's father and grandmother. Are you seriously arguing these actions don't reflect on her judgment as a parent?" Becca's attorney faltered, then pivoted to requesting generous visitation rights. The judge granted Nathan primary physical and legal custody, with Becca receiving supervised visitation twice weekly and mandatory financial counseling and parenting classes before any reconsideration of the arrangement. As we left the courthouse, Nathan walking slightly ahead with Sophia to discuss next steps, Becca approached me in the hallway. "Are you happy now?" she asked, voice low and tense. "You've destroyed my family." I looked at her, this woman I'd once welcomed into my life, who had systematically worked to cut me out of my grandson's world, who had stolen from me, lied about me, threatened me. "No, Rebecca," I said quietly. "I'm not happy. I'm relieved that Leo is safe, that Nathan is free from deception, and that I've protected what I spent a lifetime building. But there's no happiness in watching a family fracture, even when it's necessary." She stared at me, seemingly searching for weakness or insincerity. Finding neither, she turned abruptly and walked away, heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, the sound echoing like final punctuation to a difficult chapter. Spring came early to Portland that year, coaxing crocuses from the soil in late February and bringing cherry blossoms to the waterfront by mid-March. I spent more time in my garden than I had in years, turning over winter-darkened soil, planting new beds, reconnecting with the quiet rhythm of growth and renewal. The legal proceedings continued their slow, methodical progression. The district attorney filed formal charges against Becca, 27 counts, including wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and financial exploitation. Her parents were named as co-conspirators after investigation revealed their long-term involvement in similar schemes. Becca rejected an initial plea offer, insisting on her innocence despite the mountain of evidence against her. The civil case moved faster. The court ordered the sale of the Selwood house to satisfy debts and provide restitution. After settling the equity line and other fraudulent loans, there remained enough for Nathan to place a down payment on a modest 2-bedroom condominium in a family-friendly neighborhood near good schools. I helped him move packing books into careful categories, just as I'd done during my librarian days, labeling boxes with detailed contents that made Nathan smile for the first time in weeks. "Some things never change," he said, running a finger along my neat handwriting. "Books by subject then author, just like when I was a kid." "Systems matter," I replied simply, "especially when rebuilding." Leo adapted to the new home with surprising resilience, claiming the smaller bedroom and immediately covering its walls with space posters and artwork. He still had difficult days, confusion about his mother's limited presence, questions we couldn't fully answer, occasional nightmares, but the consistency of our care seemed to anchor him. I found myself in a new role, neither primary caregiver nor occasional visitor, but something essential and integrated into their daily lives. I had dinner with them 3 nights a week, helped with Leo's homework, attended his school events when Nathan couldn't leave work. We established new traditions: Sunday morning pancakes, Tuesday evening board games, monthly visits to the library where I'd once worked. As for Becca, she maintained her supervised visitation rights, though sometimes erratically. Some weeks she would arrive bearing extravagant gifts and promises of future adventures. Other weeks she would cancel last minute, leaving Leo disappointed and confused. The court-appointed supervisor reported her behavior during visits was appropriate but often performative, focused on creating special moments rather than engaging with Leo's everyday concerns and interests. In April, I received an unexpected letter from my attorney. Sophia had successfully petitioned the court for restitution from the sale of Becca's Seattle condo, which had been purchased primarily with fraudulently obtained funds. My share came to nearly $60,000, not the full amount that had been taken in my name, but substantial nonetheless. "What will you do with it?" Nathan asked when I shared the news over dinner at my house. I looked around my modest bungalow with its familiar corners and comfortable simplicity. "I'm thinking of renovating the back garden, building a proper reading nook with a pergola, maybe a small pond, something Leo might enjoy when he visits." Nathan smiled, a complicated expression crossing his face. "You're using money that was stolen from you to create something for Leo. Is that strange?" "No," he said softly. "It's very you, turning something broken into something beautiful." The renovation began in May. I worked alongside the landscapers, getting my hands dirty, planting natives that would attract butterflies and hummingbirds, selecting smooth stones for the pond edge that would be safe for a curious 6-year-old. When the wooden pergola was constructed, I hung wind chimes that tinkled gently in the breeze and installed adjustable canvas shades for hot summer days. Leo helped me arrange the first planting of the vegetable garden, his small hands carefully placing snap pea seeds along the trellis and patting soil over clusters of radish seeds. "Will they really grow from these tiny things?" he asked, examining a lettuce seed on his palm. "They will," I promised. "With time and care, they'll transform completely." He considered this, then nodded seriously. "Like our family." I looked at him, surprised by the insight. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Dad says we're growing a new kind of family. Different than before, but still good." He pressed another seed into the soil. "It was scary at first, but now it's better." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, watching him work. Children perceive more than we give them credit for, absorb the emotional currents around them, even when we try to shield them. Nathan continued to cooperate with the criminal investigation, providing testimony and documentation as needed. He attended therapy regularly, working through the complex emotions of betrayal, guilt, and grief for the life he'd thought he was building. Some days were harder than others. He still struggled with self-recrimination, with questions of how he could have been so thoroughly deceived. "I keep going back through memories, trying to see the warning signs," he confessed one evening as we sat on my new garden bench, watching Leo explore the recently completed pond. There were so many looking back, little inconsistencies, moments when things didn't quite add up. "Hindsight is deceptively clear," I said. "We see patterns afterward that were impossible to discern in the moment." "But you saw them," he pointed out. "You were suspicious of Becca long before all this happened." I considered this. I saw something, yes, a guardedness, a calculation in how she approached relationships. But I never imagined the extent of it, and I wanted to be wrong for your sake. Nathan watched his son, who was carefully returning a small frog to the pond's edge after examination. Do you think Leo will be okay after everything he's witnessed? I do, I said with conviction. Children are remarkably adaptable, especially when surrounded by consistent love and honesty. We're not hiding what happened, just explaining it in age-appropriate ways. That matters. He nodded, seeming to take comfort in this. And us, will we be okay? I reached over and took his hand, me son, flawed and human, who had made serious mistakes, but was working to repair them. We already are. In June, exactly 6 months after I discovered the forged signature, Becca's criminal case took an unexpected turn. Facing overwhelming evidence and potentially decades in prison, she accepted a revised plea deal guilty to 12 counts of fraud and identity theft in exchange for a reduced sentence of 4 years, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. The prosecutor called to inform us before it was announced publicly. She's also agreed to testify against her parents, which strengthens our case substantially, she explained. Their fraud network appears to extend beyond what we initially suspected. Will she serve actual time? Nathan asked, his voice neutral, but his hands gripping the edge of the table where we sat. Almost certainly. The judge has discretion, but given the dollar amount and the systematic nature of the fraud, incarceration is highly likely. After the call ended, Nathan sat quietly for a long moment. I should feel vindicated, he finally said. Instead, I just feel sad for Leo. It's possible to hold both, I noted. Relief that justice is being served, sadness for the collateral damage. He nodded, then straightened his shoulders. We need to talk to Leo, prepare him for what's coming. That evening, we sat with Leo in his bedroom, surrounded by his favorite stuffed animals and books, creating a space of safety for difficult news. Nathan explained in simple terms that his mother had made some serious mistakes and would need to go away for a while to take responsibility for them. Like a timeout? Leo asked, his brow furrowed. Something like that, Nathan agreed, but longer and for grown-up problems. Will I still get to see her? Yes, but the visits will be different. They'll be at a special place with specific rules. Nathan kept his voice steady, though I could see the effort it cost him. And we might need to talk to a judge again about how often those visits happen. Leo processed this information with the particular seriousness of children facing adult complexities. Is it because she took the money? The money that wasn't hers? Nathan looked startled by the directness of the question. Yes, partly. How did you know about that? Leo shrugged. I heard you talking to Grandma Emma, and Mom told me it was your fault that you were being mean to her about money. I watched Nathan struggle to maintain composure to not speak ill of Becca, despite this revelation of her attempts to manipulate Leo's understanding. The important thing, I interjected gently, is that grown-up problems are never, ever your responsibility. Your job is just to be a kid, to learn and play and grow. The rest of it, that's for the adults to handle. Leo seemed to consider this, then nodded. Okay, but I still love Mom, even if she did bad things. Of course you do, Nathan assured him, pulling him into a hug. And that's completely okay. Later, after Leo had fallen asleep, Nathan and I sat at his kitchen table, cups of tea growing cold between us. He knew more than we realized, Nathan said, still processing the conversation. Children always do, I replied. They piece things together from fragments, overheard conversations, emotional atmospheres, changes in routine. I hope we've done enough to keep him from being damaged by all this. I thought about damage, about healing, about the transformations that difficulty can produce when met with honesty and care. He'll carry this experience, I acknowledged. But carrying something isn't the same as being crushed by it. He has us, Nathan. He has stability and truth and love. Those are powerful counterweights to adversity. Nathan reached across the table and covered my hand with his own. When did you get so wise, Mom? I smiled slightly. Around the time I stopped allowing people to make me doubt my own perceptions. 1 year to the day after that Thanksgiving, when Becca had turned me away at the door, we celebrated the holiday at my house. The garden pergola had been enclosed with glass panels for the season, creating a cozy sunroom filled with potted plants and comfortable seating. Leo had helped me set the table, carefully placing name cards he'd made himself at each setting. Nathan arrived carrying homemade cranberry sauce and a small potted fir tree because, as Leo had insisted, every holiday needs a tree, even Thanksgiving. "Special delivery," he announced, setting the tree on the sideboard. Leo picked it out. "It's perfect," I said, admiring the symmetrical little evergreen. "We can plant it in the garden after the holidays." While I finished preparing dinner, Nathan and Leo hung paper ornaments they'd made, mostly rockets and stars, with one particularly artistic rendering of what Leo called Grandma Emma's Garden Galaxy. As we gathered around the table, steam rising from the turkey and root vegetables, light catching the condensation on the windows, I felt a sense of completion, of cycles properly concluded and renewed. "Should we say what we're thankful for?" Leo suggested, bouncing slightly in his chair. "That's what we did at school yesterday." "Excellent idea," I agreed. "Would you like to start?" Leo nodded seriously. "I'm thankful for Dad and Grandma Emma and my garden frogs and my new school and—" He paused, seeming to consider whether to continue. "And I'm thankful Mom is getting better at making good choices, even if it's taking a long time." Nathan and I exchanged glances, moved by his simple articulation of complex circumstances. Becca had been sentenced the previous month, receiving 3 years with eligibility for parole after 14 months. She'd begun serving her time at the minimum security women's facility, where Leo visited every other weekend, supervised by a court-appointed guardian, since Nathan had decided the environment wasn't appropriate for him to manage alone. "I'm thankful for second chances," Nathan said after a moment, "and for family that stays even when things get hard." When it came to my turn, I looked at the two faces across from me, my son, who had found his way back to integrity through difficult reckoning, my grandson resilient and thoughtful beyond his years. "I'm thankful for truth," I said simply, "and for the peace that comes from standing firmly in it." After dinner, while Nathan cleared dishes and Leo sprawled on the living room floor with a new puzzle, I stepped out into the garden. The November air was crisp, scented with fallen leaves and wood smoke from nearby chimneys. I walked to the small pond, its surface reflecting the fading afternoon light, and thought about the journey of the past year. I had lost things, trust, certainty, some measure of financial security. But I had gained others of greater value, deeper connection with Nathan's daily presence in Leo's life, and perhaps most importantly, an unshakable confidence in my own perceptions and boundaries. The house I'd helped Nathan and Becca secure was gone, sold to strangers who knew nothing of the dramas that had unfolded within its walls. The money that had been taken was partially restored, transformed into this garden sanctuary, where new memories were being created. And the family I'd feared losing had reorganized itself into something different, but genuine, smaller in some ways, but more honest in all the ways that mattered. Nathan joined me by the pond, offering a cup of hot cider. "Penny for your thoughts." I accepted the cup, warming my hands around it. "I was thinking about last Thanksgiving, standing on your porch with pumpkin bread, being told I wasn't welcome." He winced. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you then." "I'm not bringing it up to make you feel guilty," I assured him. "I'm thinking about how sometimes endings are actually beginnings in disguise." "Spoken like a true librarian," he said with a small smile. "Always finding the narrative thread." From inside, we heard Leo calling for us, excited about completing one section of his puzzle. Nathan turned toward the house, then paused, looking back at me. "You know what I realized recently? That day when Becca turned you away and you said, 'Enjoy the equity line while it lasts,' you already knew something wasn't right. You were already preparing to fight back." I hadn't thought about it that way, but he was correct. Even in that moment of rejection, some part of me had been gathering strength, taking note of discrepancies, preparing for the reckoning that would eventually come. I suppose I acknowledged. That's what I want to learn from you, Nathan said quietly. Not just for myself, but to teach Leo. How to stand firm when necessary. How to rebuild after loss. How to find strength in silence. I touched his arm gently. You already are teaching him every day. By acknowledging mistakes. By choosing truth over comfort. By showing up consistently. Leo appeared in the doorway, backlit by the warm light from inside. Dad, Grandma, come see what I did? We're coming, Nathan called back. As we walked together toward the house, toward Leo's proud display of his accomplishment, I thought about the strange alchemy of betrayal. How it can, when faced with courage and clarity, transmute into something unexpectedly valuable. Wisdom, resilience, and a deeper capacity for authentic connection. The garden would sleep soon, settling into winter's necessary dormancy. But beneath the surface, roots would continue their quiet work, gathering strength for spring's inevitable renewal. Like the garden, like Leo, like Nathan, and me, transforming silently, reclaiming what was essential, and growing toward the light.